Baroness Morgan is the first serving Secretary of State to enter the Lords, a pub trivia question right there. In this episode of Her Voice in the House, she shares what it was like moving from the green to the red benches and the issues that she is spotlighting as a peer.
Thank you, Baroness Morgan, Nicky, for joining us on Her Voice in the House today. Real pleasure to have you. I wondered if you could just kick off by introducing yourself, sharing your background, and if there is one, a defining moment that led you to where you are today.
Well, thank you so much, Laura, for the invitation to join you on this podcast. So I'm Nicky Morgan. I have been extraordinarily in the House of Lords for just over 6 years now. But before that, I was a Member of Parliament for Loughborough in East Midlands for 9.5 years. During that time, I was fortunate enough to hold a number of ministerial posts in Treasury, in Cabinet for Education and Culture, with an interlude as the first female chair of the House of Commons Treasury Select Committee. Now, obviously, in the House of Lords, doing a portfolio career outside. Many years ago, I was a lawyer specialising in M&A. So, defining moment, gosh, I mean, there are so many. Look, I guess probably one of my defining moments was being summoned to the Cabinet Room in July 2014, sitting down opposite David Cameron, and after a sort of X Factor pause, he said, "I want you to be Education Secretary." And I think that sort of put me into the cabinet, gave me a profile, gave me a department, an amazing department that is still very much defining my career today.
Amazing. So you said there you started your journey in the law and then politics. So what inspired you to get involved and choose that route?
Well, I guess the first inspirational person was my father, who was himself a local councillor. So not quite a Nepo baby, but I grew up delivering Conservative Party leaflets with him. He always was interested in, he could see I was interested in politics and current affairs. And so I joined the Conservative Party when I was 16. Margaret Thatcher was still Prime Minister then. So obviously first female Prime Minister, very inspirational. And then I just found I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the ideas. I enjoyed the dealing with lots of different people, talking to people on doorsteps, which sounds slightly odd and rather masochistic, but dealing with trying to unravel problems. I guess I'm a sort of problem solver by nature. Enjoyed the law, did a law degree, but obviously a lot of what we do here is about the law, passing laws, amending them, and everything else. And I guess what I really enjoyed when I, was finally fortunate enough to be elected was representing people. Actually, genuinely, it's the work of being an MP, and even now, actually, which is somebody comes to you with an issue, and you think, do I have the ability to help to make life better for them in all sorts of different ways, and that is, it's a huge privilege and continues to be.
And do you find that you're getting people coming to you now with very different issues compared to time as an MP? We make a joke, don't we? Some MPs now, that it's too local, right? You still get people coming to you about potholes and dog mess and parking arguments. Is there still that sort of degree, as a member of the House of Lords, or actually the people coming with those big ticket issues that they want to have a chat with you about?
I mean, I think generally they are bigger issues, national issues, I suppose. And if they do, I mean, look, I've got lots of ex-constituents who know where to find me, but they also totally understand that I've not been an MP for over 6 years now, so they will go to their MP or their councillor, and I guess that's one of the things, the defining things of the differences between Commons and Lords is that obviously you don't have constituents, so you haven't got constituents or constituency organisations setting, your agenda
Yeah.
in the same way that you do as an MP. So the bigger issues, I suppose, the amendments I've been pursuing, the issues a lot around, for example, online safety, are big. They're national, they're international issues, and that's what's again one of the great joys of being in the House of Lords, having a platform to explore that.
Yeah, and you can pick and choose to more of a degree what you want to get involved
Totally,
with,
totally.
which is the right way to do it. Perhaps you could share with us then a little bit about your time as an MP and a Secretary of State and what you consider your greatest achievements during that time in the other place.
Well, yes. I mean, it's funny looking back. In some ways, 9.5 years seem to go on forever, and in some ways, it went by in a total flash. So, I mean, getting elected for Loughborough in 2010 was my third attempt. I'd stood in Loughborough in 2005, and before that in Islington South and Finsbury in central London. The truth is, I mean, you never plan these things, and anybody who knows, particularly now, there's no such thing as a safe seat, and you're lucky if you manage to convince sufficient electorate to support you. I mean, I started off very much a backbench MP. Within a couple of months, I was fortunate enough to become a PPS to David Willits, who's Universities Minister. And that was at the time when we were just, if you remember, the coalition government, which again was something I think nobody had expected to see. We raised the tuition fees, which is a very difficult issue for Lib Dem MPs of the day. So I suppose that gave me a real insight, first of all, into sort of the workings of the House of Commons. I was fortunate to become a whip, which again gives you a tremendous sense of people. I mean, I think one of the things that you as a politician, it is about people. And whether it's constituents or your voluntary party or your colleagues in the House of Commons or working ministers, understanding what motivates people and what they're seeking and what you can do to work with them or whatever. And that carries right the way on, whether you're a cabinet minister working with colleagues trying to second guess number 10, second guess the prime minister, whether you're Treasury Select Committee trying to get consensus. I mean, that was the time. And one of the other defining issues you asked the question is obviously the moments is Brexit. So 2016 coming up for the 10th anniversary now, which again seems extraordinary. I work with people across the House, different issues, but one of the things the Treasury Select Committee, we had to do a report on Brexit and the potential economic impact. So I can tell you, trying to get consensus between Steve Baker and Wes Streeting is not easy. But we did it. We published a report. We didn't have a vote, but we decided we were just going to inform the House about future votes. And then, of course, I ended up most unexpectedly back in the Boris Johnson cabinet as culture secretary. And again, culture is a wonderful position, great department, and gave me that interest and that determination to bring about the Online Safety Act.
Fantastic. So, we've lived through some of the crazier moments the past 10 years. And like you say, Brexit anniversary this year, who can believe that? There was obviously some significant challenges that you would have faced as an MP, but personally as well during that time with colleagues. How did you overcome those and find a way forward?
Yeah, I mean, it was really tough, and lots of people have very tough challenges in their careers, so I don't want to kind of over-egg this. But I think for many MPs personally, partly because a friendship's ended over it, as an MP, your relationship with your local voluntary party, and they are mostly volunteers, is really important. And actually, to be on a different side of an issue from them when you're used to being all Conservatives in the room together, and then to have a very divided party, very unhappy relationship in the parliamentary party, then in the voluntary party was very challenging. Actually, it did define things. I mean, ultimately, I decided I needed to try to work with people on the other side of the issue from me. I mean, I didn't vote to exit, but ultimately, I thought we couldn't carry on as we were with a divided parliament, not sorting out issues. We spent over 3 years really talking about nothing else but Brexit. The country thought we were going mad in Westminster. And you have to work, that's one of the other lessons, you have to work with people with differing views. But you also have to understand people's motivations, and they're not always, to get to the right place, which is frustrating. So I suppose that was one of the lessons as well, which is that not everybody ultimately wants to solve things to move forward.
And how do you define leadership? And perhaps during that time, who did you look? Well, I know you're a leader yourself, but who did you look to for inspiration? And
Gosh, that's a really that is a good question. I mean, look, I think leadership is about getting people to follow you, even when perhaps they are not so convinced by what you're advocating. I think one of those moments, I mean, perhaps not Brexit, but was David Cameron persuading the Conservative Party to go into coalition with the Lib Dems, and that was not what people had envisaged. But actually, because of the work they put in, they could see the synergies in the manifestos. Leadership was in short supply in the Brexit period on all sides, to be honest with you. And I think that you end up in politics generally. I think what I would say is that in politics, you have to think what's important. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? what's important to me? How do I stay true to that and behave in a way that hopefully gives people outside Westminster confidence in their elected representatives? And I'm struggling to answer your question, Laura, because I'm honestly struggling to think over that period of time. I'm not sure that any of us really demonstrated sufficient national leadership on Brexit, and that in itself was a lesson, I think, in how not to do it.
Yeah. I think we all don't like to use the term muddling through, but we never experienced that before. And, trying to make the best of the situation. And like you say, bring everyone together and find that common way forward for the country because
Yeah,
they voted. I think that's what people wanted. And I think looking back now,
yeah, I think absolutely they wanted. I mean, at the end of the day, Parliament had asked the country a question. The country had given them an answer, and that was the answer. The answer was go away and sort that out. Basically, not ask the question again or think about, well, what did somebody mean and everything else. I think it all took far too long. But I think what was interesting, it really challenged this whole notion of a representative democracy, because I would get people yelling at me saying, you're there to think, you're there to do what we've told you to do, and that's not the way that the British democracy works. But I think it did strain things sufficiently, and I think it has irrevocably changed that. Plus, I think the rise in social media and some other things have changed the way that people feel about Westminster and the people that they elect.
mm. So thinking about who inspires you, is a particular role model or a mentor that perhaps, at the start of your journey or when you made it here to Parliament, or perhaps, during the 6 years you've been in the Lords, is there anyone that you particularly look to?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of people. I think in life, what you do rather than one particular person, you'll look at different, role models, and the way that people conduct themselves. I mean, kind of outside Westminster. So I was fortunate enough. I'm on the Science Museum Group board, and Dame Mary Archer was the chair when I arrived there, and I thought that and I still think that she's brilliant. I'm not going to say how old she is, but she remains curious. And I found her to be a really effective chair. And then I had the great fortune when I was Education Secretary and beyond, actually, to work with the great Shirley Conran, who was one of the best networkers I have ever seen. And she used to persuade all sorts of people to support things and everything else. Look, I think in the House of Lords, I think there are some excellent women. I have the great pleasure of working with Bevan Kidron, who I think is absolutely passionate about things. And I think that, I mean, you've interviewed Gabby Burton, who has really done a huge amount, is doing a huge amount in terms of her review on violent online pornography. So I think there are women like that who take an issue. I mean, my whip in the House of Lords is Baroness Anne Jenkin, and she's done a fantastic job of getting more women into Parliament, into the Conservative Party, stand for Parliament. So people like that, I guess, who take an issue, feel passionate about it, and absolutely run with it.
Strong women.
Yes,
Strong Girls Club, that's what we like.
exactly.
So turning then to the Lords, how did you find the switch from moving from the green benches to the red benches? Was it a big shock?
It is a bit of a shock, and you think to yourself, well, I know there is a debate about whether it's easy to come into the House of Lords having been in the Commons, because you've got a sense of parliamentary process, or whether it's better to come in completely fresh from outside. Fun enough, I think the hardest thing, and I watch fellow former MPs coming in, is the language. Learning not to call people honourable members, but calling them noble lords, or my noble friend, or the minister, the noble minister, is actually, that takes quite a lot of time. I think the tone is completely different. So I think I'm the only person to have moved as a department minister, in fact, Departmental Secretary of State, from the House of Commons to the House of Lords without a break in service, because I went in as Culture Secretary. There's a useful piece of trivia for any pub quiz anyone might ever want to ask a question about. And what was interesting, of course, in the House of Commons is you can always fall back on a bit of partisanship. You can expect your bitches behind you to be, hopefully supporting you. It's a very different vibe in the House of Lords. First of all, you've got experts, and there's no point trying to pretend that you know what you're talking about if you don't. Much better just to admit that and say that you'll pursue it. So you can't be partisan, but you learn. I find every time I go to the House of Lords, I learn something, even if it's an area of I know nothing about. I sit on the bench, I listen to the debate, and there's somebody speaking with great authority usually, and an interesting point, and that in itself is it's a privilege. I can't say that I always did that in the House of Commons.
Still goes on. How do you find the speaking and the intervening that because that's obviously different because it's just who shouts the loudest in this circumstance?
Yeah, I have to say that's the one bit of the households, and I'm not here as much as other people, but it's it's not meant to be a full time thing. I think that is the one bit that I find hardest and most uncomfortable. I understand why there aren't speaker lists, but I would urge on you, Lord Speaker, to look at that. Actually, I think we're kind of done with the he who speaks loudest, intervenes. What tends to happen is there tends to be, firstly, it sort of goes in a clockwise direction, usually. The House tends to want to hear from people who do know most about the subject. So that's how people will give way, but not always. And I think that's a shame. And given the size of the Lords now, um, I think moving towards something to do with speakers lists may well be necessary.
Think so. And would you say there needs to be reform of the sitting hours? So, for example, getting rid of like the dinner break or the Lord sitting in the morning, like mirroring what the Commons does, Tuesday to the rest of the week. Would that help get legislation through?
The House of Lords having to pick up an awful lot of detailed scrutiny of bills because the House of Commons doesn't really have the time because of lots of other things that are going on. I think that's fine. I think that's what the House of Lords best does for the country, actually, is that scrutiny function. But I don't think that scrutiny is best done at gone 10 o'clock at night. And I also think that if you decide to sit late, you're basically saying, unless you live or can stay in central London, then taking part in bills, because you don't often know when the amendments are coming in, is basically not for everyone. And I think that's not what we want to be if you want to be a truly inclusive house, basically. So I think, yes, bringing things forward. I'm not averse to having dinner break business because I think sometimes it's if I've been there and a minister for hours on the front bench.
I get it done, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's good to have a break to have talk about something else. But I think that sitting late and not being sure exactly what it is you're going to be discussing doesn't lend itself to the best scrutiny. And I also think there's some detailed stuff about it's great that we look at every amendment, but clearly there are going to be some amendments that carry more weight than others, and how you reflect that in the debates, I think, is a bit of a challenge for the new Lord Speaker, probably.
To be interesting to see what agenda he shapes moving forward.
Quite.
For sure. So perhaps you could just touch on a few of the issues that you're spotlighting, championing in the Lords. You said about online safety. Obviously, that's one that's cross-party, cross-bounce that you're interested in. But I think our listeners would love to know what your hot topics that you get excited about.
Well, lots of well, I suppose what I'm working on at the moment is I'm very surprised people know, obviously, education related, so the children wellbeing and schools bill, and I'd love to be doing more on that. I'm particularly focused there on, firstly, on the powers around schools becoming academies. I think that has been successful. That doesn't mean that these things aren't always up for debate, but we're looking at that. And in that bill, fun enough, just before coming to record this, I've just been outside with some campaigners on the extension of relationship and sex education to 16 to 18-year-olds in further education colleges. Extraordinarily, it applies to those in schools, but not in FE colleges. And, we're asking our young people to know more about dangers online, non-consensual sharing of images, things like strangulation, issues around consent. I think that sort of education should be open and actually compulsory for all 16 to 18-year-olds. That's one thing. In terms of online, I think the growing use of AI, algorithms, violence against women and girls online. And actually, violence against women and girls is a theme, I think, as we kind of said earlier on, when you're in the laws, because you could speak out anything, you've got to focus. And so Vorg issues. So have been working on an amendment to the crime and policing bill, and I'll bring it back for the railways bill about violence against women and girls on trains. Obviously applies to public transport generally, but actually responsibility of British Transport Police and the government when they're nationalising the railways on that to fulfil their Vorg strategy. So those are just, some of the issues. The other thing actually I did was chaired an inquiry about online fraud, and so I continue to sort of look at that as an issue and work with peers on a cross-party basis too.
So I can probably anticipate the answers to this question, but work-life balance, how do you separate it? And if you do, what's the secret that you can share with us all?
Well, I'm not sure that I do. There's a secret. I bet probably all of us you're talking to say the same thing. Look, I think you have to run your life as a whole, but I think the important part is you do have to carve out some time when you are not working, not watching the emails, not online, and everything else. Running has always been my one of my ways of creating headspace. And the last 18 months, I've taken up yoga as well. And also not living in London. I mean, I still live in my former constituency of Loughborough, which means I know East Midlands trains extremely well up and down. But actually living outside the capital, away from Westminster, is really important to me. It is all a bit of a juggle. It's just being trying to be highly organised and prioritisation. One of my New Year's resolutions is learn to be better about saying no to things. But then interesting things come along, and it's really hard to say no.
I'm glad you didn't say no to this opportunity.
Certainly not.
Good stuff. What advice then would you give to your younger self?
I think my big advice would be, don't rush it. Don't rush life, basically. I think there's a sort of view I certainly had, in my 20s and 30s, which is got to get on with it, got to, do this in life, pass this exam, stand for this seat, get this job, have this experience. And actually, there's plenty of life after your turn 40, and so lots of opportunity to enjoy things. And I think the other thing is be prepared for the unexpected. I mean, I did not expect that call to join the cabinet. I didn't expect to stand down at the 2019 general election. Certainly didn't expect to be asked to come to the House of Lords. And so I think sort of allowing space for the unexpected is one of life's great pleasures.
And is there any specific advice you would offer to women who want to stand?
Well, I would say, go for it. I mean, despite all the trials and tribulations of being elected, still the best thing that I've ever done. It's endlessly fascinating. I think you have to go into it with your eyes open. So you have to expect that, not everyone's going to agree with you. I think knowing why you're doing it. I think women are particularly good at this, actually. Often they'll stand for a position or something because they know that there's something they want to achieve. They might have something in their life that they want to put right or get right for other people. So, thinking about all that. My big advice for people wanting to stand for being an MP usually is do something else first. Because actually my experience in the law and in a sort of what I'd call a normal working environment, I think we can agree Westminster is not a normal working environment, but having been there in a slightly more normal working environment has stood me in really, really good stead when I had to employ people as an MP, when I had to help to run a government department, when I had to chair meetings. Those things are all big life skills that you can practice outside before you come to Westminster.
And I think you definitely see that difference between colleagues who have that outside experience to those who perhaps have gone a different way,
Sure.
and being in the room with them. We always end this podcast with a tough question. And maybe it's tougher than ones that you've had at the dispatch box, but perhaps you could describe for us in one word the Lords.
Fascinating. Is that prescriptionally brief?
Yes, that's very brief. I've had some of your colleagues who've said a word and then they want to explain it, which is it's very nice. But
I genuinely, I can always explain. Politicians can always add words. Yeah. No, it is genuinely fascinating. Colleagues are fascinating.
yeah, I think that's a really lovely way to round off this chat. So thank you, Nicky, Baroness Morgan, for joining us on her Voice in Our House, and hope that you will come back perhaps for a future episode and talk about your next set of campaigns.
Love to. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you.
Please like, subscribe and share the podcast, and get in touch if you have any suggestions on who you'd like us and Her Voice in the House to feature in a future episode. Thanks so much for listening.